Welcome to Formosa Dream Chasers.
We're your hosts, Mary Ann
and Ching En.
Please join us as we explore the journeys amazing people take in pursuit of their dreams.
And get insights from their experiences.
Let's hit the road
and get started.
Hello and welcome back to Formosa Dream Chasers with me, your host, Mary Ann Shoko. For those tuning in for the first time to Formosa Dream Chasers, this is a show about ordinary people who step outside of their comfort zones to pursue meaningful lives, passions, and dreams, whether here in Taiwan or elsewhere. Now, over the last 2 episodes, I've been doing something a little bit different from our usual interview format. So instead of sitting down with guests, I've been sharing more personal reflections about the realities of chasing dreams and building a meaningful life. In episode 1, we talked about the uncertainty that comes with being in the middle of the journey, the comparison when you're sitting there because you haven't achieved your dreams yet and you're still working your way towards it, but you can't help but compare yourself with other people. And with that comes the pressure, right? The pressure of doing well. And then you get the feeling of being left behind. And you see how everyone seems to be achieving things, whereas you're still somewhere there in between, still in the middle of your journey. And we were talking about how progress often looks very different from what we imagined when we started out this whole journey. And in episode 2, we talked about something a little bit heavier, which is the hidden cost of chasing our goals or the cost of pursuing our dreams. We inevitably end up sacrificing a number of things to be able to pursue our goals. And with that, sometimes comes burnout, we have exhaustion, we're overworked, and it's very easy to kind of lose ourselves while trying to build the future that we want. And so today, I want to continue that conversation by talking about something I think what many people quietly struggle with and rarely say out loud. And that is what happens when you've achieved your dreams or you've achieved your goal. And then what do you do when, having achieved all of this, it stops becoming meaningful? Or maybe another way to ask this is, what happens when we become so focused on achieving things that we forget to simply live and enjoy life? The reason why I bring this up is because I feel that a lot of us growing up believe life kind of works as a checklist, right? You start out studying hard, you get good grades, and then next on the list would be finding a stable career, earning more money, getting that good position. And then all of this is tied into our idea of how to be successful, and then what we need to do to build a good life. And I want to emphasize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing these things. Of course not, right? It's important to have goals. It's important to be moving forward, right? And to achieve things. And of course, it's also important to have a dream, whatever that dream may be. But I think somewhere along the lines, many of us sort of start believing that our worth is tied into entirely what we accomplish, and that we are only valuable when we are being productive, and then we are only successful when we're actually achieving something, and that we are only moving forward when there is visible progress. And to be honest, I kind of feel that where we are now, living in this age and time, especially with the presence of media, this reinforces that mindset constantly, nonstop. Everything around us is focused on optimization, on, how to be more efficient, how to be more productive, how to achieve more with less time, and then how to turn your passions into careers. And it's just gotten to the point where even the act of resting somehow needs to be optimized, right? We don't just simply rest anymore. We have to optimize our sleep. We have to optimize our routines. And we also have to optimize our recovery. Everything seems to be like a set goal, and everything should be super efficient. And, again, I want to reiterate, in all honesty, don't think self-improvement is bad. But I do feel that there is some kind of danger, right? When our entire lives become so centered around achieving goals, to this idea of having to hit milestones all the time. Because when you're always focused on getting to the next thing, you don't focus on the journey itself. You eventually stop asking yourself, like, am I enjoying the process? Am I enjoying life? And instead, you start looking at how much time it's taken for you to be able to achieve something. And then you start questioning yourself. Am I doing enough? And am I being efficient? All of these focus on different things, right? When you focus on the journey itself and what you're going through and what you're doing to achieve it, I feel questioning that in that manner makes you look at things from a very different perspective, as opposed to looking at it from a focused on your goals kind of perspective. Because when you look at it from only focusing on your goals, you eventually hit this perspective of just achieving or failure, right? Because it boils down to whether or not you were able to do something versus whether or not you failed at it. Whereas if you focus on looking at whether you're enjoying the process of achieving that dream, whether you're enjoying that, then although the focus is still somewhat on the goal, it's more centered around the entire process. And again, I would like to point out, I just feel that these are very different perspectives. And this is something that I gradually realized over time, because I stopped enjoying doing the things that I loved, especially after years of working and trying to build stability and trying to prove myself, right? And trying to move forward. What I come to realize is there's always another goal. There's always another responsibility. There's always something else that needs to improve. And there's always something else that needs to be fixed. Looking at all of that, looking at what needs to be done, it can't help but reinforce the idea that you're not doing enough. That somehow you're behind and that you're failing in whatever it is you're trying to do. Because there's always more to do, right? The list of things to do, that checklist, it's never ending. And eventually it just becomes really easy to start postponing living. You make promises to yourself that you don't actually ever fulfill, right? You tell yourself, I'll rest later. I'll start enjoying life after I finish this project. Or, I'll take some time off to travel, maybe when things calm down. Or, you tell yourself, I'll spend more time with my friends and my family once I get on top of my work. Once work becomes more manageable. And, these are things that I've done over the years. And you can't help but feel guilty when you're doing that, right? Because you know that you're supposed to maybe spend time with family, for example, but then you always end up brushing them off, perhaps without ill intent. But the thing is, life and time doesn't slow down. And it also becomes a habit when you start putting down your needs and the responsibility of being able to finish things become more important than your needs. For example, your need to rest, your need to take a break, your need to just slow down and take time to enjoy life. That, I feel, is something that we end up doing, especially when we become too goal driven and when we become too focused on work. And so because of that, perhaps we keep moving towards the finish line, but not realizing that the finish line also itself also keeps on moving. It's not something that's set in stone. One day, as you look around you and look at your family and friends and where they are in their lives, you realize that while you were so busy chasing, let's say, your goals, or let's say working hard, that people have moved on with their lives, and so have you, but your life has been so tied into work that you don't really realize that time is passing you by. And you start asking yourselves, when was the last time I actually felt present in my life? Not necessarily being productive, not necessarily being efficient, or not necessarily actually being useful. Just there, present. Right now in this day and age, I just feel that that is something many people are needing right now. People's presence and your own presence, not being constantly stimulated or not being always endlessly productive and not always running after goals and trying to achieve something. It's very hard for us to be able to simply exist, completely being present fully in a moment without feeling guilty about it. One thing that I reflect on is perhaps part of the reason why this is also difficult is because we become very uncomfortable with being still. Just being there and not doing anything might feel strange, especially if things are silent. If you're not always constantly chasing after something, all of these other thoughts come in. And so you still end up being pushed somehow to think about your checklist. And when you do that, you're actually not being still. You still feel pressured. And it's hard for us, I think, to be able to sit still and enjoy doing nothing. Give ourselves that permission where we can just stop and rest. As I was mentioning, sometimes even during rest, our minds are still running nonstop. We're thinking about the unfinished tasks. We're thinking about our to-do list. We're thinking about who we should reply to next. And we're thinking about what needs to be done by tomorrow. And it's that constant nonstop pressure that's just still there at the back of our minds. And I can't help but reflect that this says a lot about the way many of us live right now, especially when it comes to my life, right? I'm taking the time to sort of reflect on things. And somewhere along the way of achieving goals, I feel that we start focusing on learning on how to survive, on being able to achieve what it is we want for ourselves, that we end up forgetting that part of the journey is really simply to experience life. And I've mentioned this in our previous episodes, but I feel that this is something still worth reiterating. Looking back on the things that I've done, truly, the moments that actually matter were not achieving my goals. I don't really recall how much enjoyment I got once I achieved something that I really wanted. Whenever I think back on events that are important to me, truly these times are not milestones. They weren't moments of recognition, and they weren't things that looked impressive on paper. These moments were usually the ones that were incredibly small, in the sense that I wasn't really achieving something, but I was just there. I was present, having a meaningful conversation with a friend. I was enjoying life, right? Enjoying a meal, enjoying my time traveling, having some time doing the things that I enjoy without being pressured about needing to do stuff. Being able to sleep and rest and not necessarily be bombarded by all of these thoughts of what I need to do next. Finding that moment of realizing that I'm actually okay. These are very small but impactful moments, and oftentimes they're not tied into doing something. And as we're so busy trying to get to our goal, usually these are also the moments that we miss. As I reflect on all these things, I can't help but realize, for myself at least, that meaning is often found in presence and not performance. Perhaps this is definitely opposite to what we're learning right now in modern times. Even our own parents, right? Our families, they remind us that we need to be doing something. We need to be achieving something. Even things that are happening that we see on social media, we're constantly being reminded to chase the next thing, right? Be able to hit the next level, be better versions of ourselves, make sure we accomplish our goals. So what I want to say is that I think while growth is important, there's also wisdom in learning how to appreciate where we are. Not because we want to stop growing, right? Or that we want to stop achieving, but because we also don't want to miss out on life as well. Because life is happening right now too. And, if you're so focused on what you want to happen in the future, you miss out on your present. And I feel that one of the saddest things that happen to us when we become so focused on building a life of our dreams that we don't actually allow ourselves to live it. And I feel that it kind of takes away from the process itself and from getting that feeling of achieving something. Because, as I said, right, when you're also trying to achieve something, you end up sacrificing stuff. You sacrifice your time, definitely, you sacrifice energy, but it's also the moments where you spend time with people in your life that you end up sacrificing as well. It's important to remind ourselves that life is not only about arriving somewhere someday, but it's also about being present for the moments happening right now while we're still on the way there. At the end of the day, success means very little if we become too exhausted, too disconnected, or too absent to actually experience the life that we worked so hard to build. So perhaps the goal is not just to achieve our dreams, but to remain connected to ourselves, to others, and to life itself while we pursue them. Thank you for tuning in to Formosa Dream Chasers. I'll see you next time.